Explosions and crumbling. So this video is going to be made up of two parts. First part, we're going to make something explode, and the second part, we're going to make something crumble. And that ties a little bit into the first part, the explosions bit. So all I'm going to do first of all is click on the background. So we've got our cube. I'm just going to drag up this so we can see the animator a little bit clearer. And all I'm going to do with my cube selected is go to Object, down to Quick Effects, and going to press Quick Explode. And what you'll notice is this little red line appears here over the first 50 frames or so, and I've got this quick explode option here as well. So it's basically saying that this is going to blow up into 100 pieces over the space of 50 frames. So if I press play, that's what happens. Now, clearly, that wasn't 100. But just to point something out as well, if I go back onto frame number 0, so it's back as its full cube, over on the particle side of things here, this is basically the same as what we had over here on the left-hand side. So I can choose the number of pieces it's going to blow up into. Clearly, it wasn't 100 when I first just did it. Where it's going to start, how long it's going to last, and the other parts which were on that little kind of menu which were here as well, were how fast it explodes as well. So I'm assuming that's meter per second. Now then, like I said, when I press play, that was not 100 pieces. And even if I change that to 1,000 pieces and press play, nothing's going to change. It's going to basically still be those 4 or 5 pieces which they were there. Now, the reason why that happens is because the cube, I haven't actually done any editing of it at all. And what I mean by that is if I come onto the edit mode, I can right click on the cube when it's all selected, and I press subdivide, and I can break that down into numerous faces. You can see there are lots and bits of pieces of this as well. Now, if I wanted to, I could press A to select it all again and right click one more time and subdivide and keep subdividing it so there are like thousands of pieces. But the issue is, I'll find a little bit later, is when I try to explode and I want it to interact with things, my PC will crash. Now, not saying yours would, but just to kind of give you a kind of a heads up that might be an issue for you. So I'm just going to undo what I just did there a second, so it's not subdivided as many times. But if I come back to object mode now, and I go across to our particles, we had it set as 1,000, so it's kept that for us. And when I press play, it breaks down into those amount of pieces. Now, I could knock that up to 10,000 pieces, and it will kind of slow everything down and go a bit slower, but a bit more detailed. But what I want to show you now, because that was just simply how to make something explode, it's easy enough to do. I'm also now going to see how this interacts with a plane. So I'm going to add a plane, so this is going to be my surface, basically. I'm going to scale that up so it's a little bit bigger. I'm going to look from the side. I'm going to drag it down so it is beneath our cube. And if I press play now, nothing will actually happen apart from the fact it blows up, but you can see it goes straight through it. So what I'll need to do for both the cube and I'm going to go back to frame 0 so we can see the cube as it is, and the plane, and I'm going to have to do some physics on it. So I'm going to click on it and choose rigid body. This isn't going to drop, so I'm going to keep that as passive. So it's just something which gets acted on. And I'm also going to click collision. I'm back on our cube, which we already kind of have exploding, and you can see that by the red line down here. We're also going to click rigid body. We're going to keep it as active, and we're going to press collision. And this time when I press play, you'll see that the items which explode from the cube, they bounce around for 50 frames. Now, if I want that to bounce around a little bit further, if I've got the cube selected, it seems like I have, yet, got it selected over here, back on the physics, and I just want to make that last the 250 frames, which everything else seems to as a default anyway. So if I rewind that back and press play, those explode and they bounce around. Now, that doesn't look natural to me in terms of the way it's kind of bouncing along. I wouldn't want them to bounce along. They will eventually fade out, and that's the end of the animation, but that doesn't look right to me. And that's why I said there's two parts to this, because what we're actually going to do is actually look at part 2, which is going to be crumbling. So the second part of this video is going to be showing how to make something look a little bit more effective than the explosions we just did. So I've set up a new Blender. Just got a cube, I haven't done anything with it. I am going to add a plane, just like we did with the explosion part. And then I'm just going to scale it out as well. And then looking at it from the side, I'm going to move it down so it's just beneath our cube. And if I come back onto this, I'm just going to quickly add on the physics side of things a rigid body to our plane, and it's going to be passive so it doesn't drop. And we're also going to add a collision. And we're going to do pretty much the same with our cube as well. We're going to do rigid body. We're not going to change it to passive. We're going to keep it as active, and we're going to press collision. Now, in terms of making something crumble, the way to do it, you will need to go up to Edit, up to Preferences, and then when this appears, where the search bar is, if you can start typing in fracture, you will get object cell fractures. You can see I've already got it ticked on mine. Now, what that means is basically when you go to object and when you go down to quick effects, you'll have cell fracture on there. So if I click on cell fracture, this window appears and it looks a little bit intimidating, but all we're focusing on really is the source limit, the noise. We will look at this recursion bit a little bit later, and I am going to tick this bit where it says smooth interior, and in fact I'm going to untick sharp edges. So the source limit is basically saying um, how many pieces you want your object to kind of crumble into, and the noise, if I left it at 0, basically all of those bits within the object will look more or less the same, whereas the noise kind of randomizes the shapes which kind of crumble away from it. And you'll see what I mean now. So when I press OK, remember I've got to set to 100, so that's the maximum it can be. But that does it really, really quickly. You can see that that's not 100 pieces. And in fact, if you look across here now where it's cube, we've got all these cube cells, and it goes down to whatever that one is there. Now, if I press play, nothing will actually happen because there is one other thing you've got to do while it's all selected, that is. If you go back up to object and down to rigid body and press add active, and then when I press play, you'll see it blows up. But we've still got the cube, the original cube, kind of floating about. Now, basically what that is, the cube, these cell fractures have been built around the perimeter of the cube. So if you want something to blow up and you don't want to see the cube like we just did, we just simply hide the cube and we press play and everything goes flying off. And that looks a little bit more like you'd expect from an explosion, not like the explosion part we did earlier. But if you don't want them to kind of explode, if you actually get rid of the cube by deleting it and then pressing play, these will just crumble down. But as you can see, because they are quite chunky pieces, they don't crumble very well. So what I'm going to do is Control Z back to the point of we haven't done the cell fracture. I'm then going to go back up to Object, Quick Effects, and Cell Fracture again. No, I'm not going to do that. That's a complete lie, in fact. I'm going to click away from that. The reason why it only kind of like went into about 10 pieces is because we didn't subdivide the cube like we did with the explosion. So if we go back to the edit mode and we right click and subdivide, and I'm going to maximize that up to 10, and you could do more if you wanted to, but just in this example, just want to do it so we can see that there are multiple faces within this then. Back on your object modes, if I do what I said I was going to do, so object, quick effects, and cell fracture, I'm actually going to knock that up to about 200 this time. And I'm going to press OK, and we are going to come back and look at this recursion in a moment, but just to show you what that does. It takes a little bit longer. You can see if it's actually doing that for us, and eventually, when the cursor stops kind of flashing away, we get all those red dots appearing, and you'll notice over here on the right-hand side, when it's finished, that is, there will be loads more things which are within the cube then, or being broken down from the cube. So if I scroll down, we're up to like 100 odd, 130 odd, and kind of make out there. And like I said before, we've got to go to Object and put it as an add active. And if I press play again, it blows up with more pieces. I can hide the cube if I wanted to, like I showed you earlier, but in fact I'm going to delete the cube at this point, and I'm going to rewind it back, and you'll notice when you press play, it kind of crumbles down like that. Now, the thing I wanted to show you as well, so I'm going to undo this back to the point of it goes back to without the effect added to it. If we go back to quick effects and cell fracture, just wanted to point out what this recursion bit does. So what you might have noticed, all the pieces within there are roughly about the same size. So the recursion, if I kind of set it to 5 and I do it as random, what it does if I press OK, and I can actually explain it as it's doing it. Once it's done this process of doing the cell fracture, and it might take a couple of seconds for that to kick in, what it does then, it grabs the individual cells at random and it will break them down even further. And you'll see that happening when all these like kind of little red bits appear. So here we go. So it's breaking down certain parts of that even further again. So like 5 times over. So you could set the recursion a lot higher to make this crumble down to make it look a little bit more natural, if that makes sense. So once that's finished, I got to again go back to object, and this is key to do this, otherwise it won't work. The rigid body and add active. I'm going to remove the cube, and I'm going to press play, and you'll notice as it falls, there are kind of smaller bits in it. So it actually looks a bit more like a pile of rubble crumbling would be then. And the last thing I want to kind of point out, you can actually interact with this, which is really nice. I want to add a sphere. Doesn't matter really. It doesn't matter what shape you add onto it. I'm going to bring it across onto the left-hand side, and I'm going to animate this so it actually travels through our kind of crumbling pile. So on frame number one, I've pressed record, and for some reason on mine it doesn't work very well. So I'm just going to lock it into position there, so we get the keyframe appearing on frame number one. And on frame 20, when it's still in the process of crumbling, I'm actually going to drag it across to this area. And you can see I've got a keyframe here now, so I won't need to lock these again because they've already been locked. I'm just going to stop it from doing this recording and rewind it back and press play, and nothing happens. Now, the reason why nothing's happened is a couple of things really. On this, I need to make sure that I have added a rigid body. We're going to keep it as active and collision. And if I scroll down, and I think it's within the rigid body settings, I just need to tick animated. And I'm also going to make sure that the collision shape is mesh. So it basically makes sure that it kind of uses the structure of this as our kind of collider then. So this time when I press play, it goes through and it sends them flying all over the place. Now I wonder how I'm going to do that in my animation. Ta-da! I tried to make it look like it was going to snow. Hang on a minute. Ta-da! That's better.